So what's up people, and welcome to another Warframe video. So in this video I would like to go over the recent rework that Digital Extremes has done on the Saren frame. Now for those of you who are familiar with this frame, you know that this is one of those frames that a lot of veteran players like to take to advanced missions because of the high amount of damage that it can deal. Its first ability, Spore, is one of those abilities that once you cast it and then use long-reaching weapons such as a pole arm or a whip, can cause devastating damage to the enemy, namely killing a lot of enemies all at once. And so this was one of those really popular endgame style of frames that a lot of people used in advanced missions, namely because, again, of the first ability. Now the recent rework has changed the first ability, and this has caused a controversy amongst a lot of the players. You know, the typical debate that comes up, oh, the frame has been nerfed, no, the frame has been buffed, you know, and it became a little bit confusing exactly what has happened to the frame. So I wanted to take a look at how Digital Extremes has changed the frame, and then what sort of results one can expect from the gameplay due to the recent changes. So the biggest change in the actual frame itself can be seen in the armor rating, and this has definitely been buffed. So now Saren has an armor rating of 225, and Saren Prime has an armor rating of 300. And this is pretty good because that makes the frame quite a bit more durable. I mean, one of the problems that Saren had was, of course, it was a strong damage dealer, but it was also quite a squishy frame. And so if it got hit, then you would be in quite a bit of trouble. This new version actually has a significant increase in armor and makes it more durable so that it could withstand quite a bit more damage in the missions. Of course, most people are not really interested in the changes in the armor rating, but more in what has changed in its first ability, Spores. And so here's what I can figure out, and here's why many people may be saying that this has nerfed the frame. Spores can no longer be worked with its Saren's second ability, Molten, and so you can't cast the spores onto the decoy that's created in Molten. The other thing is that you can no longer stack spore casting. So if you recast spores, then the original spores will detonate and it will start all over again. So you can't stack them one casting on top of the another like you used to in the past. And finally, the spreading of the spores doesn't work exactly like the way it used to. And so a lot of people have said that this has made it more difficult because you no longer can do what you used to be able to do, which was to cast Molt. And then on the decoy, you cast a lot of spores, and then you just ran away, and the enemy will come and shoot at the decoy. And of course, that would burst the spores and infect the enemy, and then of course start killing them. And so with the rework, this ability has been removed. And this was a conscious decision by DE to get rid of this ability, mostly because they wanted to create a game that was a little bit more synergistic in its gameplay. So in the future, there will be a lot less abilities in many of these frames where you could just, push one ability, go out and make a sandwich and come back and, 500 enemies are gone. Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but you get the idea. These gameplays where you really don't have much challenge to playing the game, you just sit back and tap a key and get through the mission that way. Instead, they want to create more synergy associated with the gameplay to make it more interesting. So the question that comes up, of course, is if they removed this capability, then what do you get back in return? So the big change to Spore in a positive manner is that it now is an indefinite ability. So once you infect the enemy with Spore, until it dies, it basically will remain infected. So previously there was a time limit to Spore, but now, once the enemy is infected, then that enemy will remain infected until it actually dies. In addition, Spore has an unmaxed damage capability or uncapped damage capability. And what I mean by that is the damage continues to increase the longer Spore stays on an enemy. And since, of course, the duration is unlimited, the damage is also unlimited. And so it could continue to go up in damage, dealing more and more damage as it remains with the enemy. And so, yeah, this can scale quite well with regards to what sort of enemy you're dealing with. And because of that, Spore becomes very, potentially a strong ability with regards to most any type of enemy that it encounters. Finally, the damage type of Spore has been changed from viral to corrosive, so this has become quite useful even for enemies that have strong amounts of armor. Now, some of you may be worried with regards to how the spores spread if you can no longer cast it on Molt, and the best way to spread the spores is to inflict damage on the enemy. And so when you first cast the spore on one of the enemies, you should immediately attack it and damage it so that it would spread the spores. And once it does that, the spores spread to any of the neighboring enemies that are within range based upon the range capabilities of your frame. And what you will notice is once you cast Spore, you'll notice an indicator appear at the lower right hand section of the screen. And it will give you two pieces of information. The number inside the indicator itself is the amount of damage that Spore is inflicting, and the number underneath that indicator circle is the number of enemies that it's infecting at the moment. So by continuously damaging the enemies that are infected, you'll be able to spread Spore to all the enemies that are coming into the range, as well as increase the damage from the Spore effect itself, because the spread spores do stack, and once it reinfects infected enemy, it will actually increase the damage further. Now, to show how well the Spore works, I'll take a 1 level 100 corrupted heavy gunner, and I'll basically fight it in melee mode, and I won't be in invincibility mode in this case. And before we start with the Spore, I'll show you how the enemy will fare if I just use my Zaw and didn't use Spore. So my Zaw is set up for mostly gas status, and it's a Zaw that's set up for high levels of status rather than hit. And it's working okay. I mean, it's giving nice knockback, and it's definitely giving status damage, but it's sure taking a long time because of course it is a level 100 corrupted heavy gunner. And so the amount of armor it has is relatively high. Oop. Oh shoot. I didn't want that to happen. Okay, well, you get the idea. So this time, if we take the same level 100 corrupted heavy gunner, once again, not in invincibility mode, and using the same melee weapon, but this time using Spore, you could see that yeah, the damage is increasing quite a bit more, and the enemy is taken down a lot easier. So Spore by itself is a very capable ability, but now if you combine it with Saren's third ability, Toxic Lash, it becomes even more damaging. So Toxic Lash was one of those abilities that a lot of players didn't use for Saren. It basically gave a little bit of toxin damage, additional toxin damage to your melee weapon in the past. Well, now it gives toxin damage to all of your weapons, primary, secondary, or melee, and it gives it for a longer duration. And when you combine it with the present Spore, it can give some very noticeable damaging boost. So if we were to go back to the same corrupted level 100 Heavy Gunner Eximus that we were working with before, but this time instead of just Spore, we also used Toxic Lash. Let me put that on. And as you can see, that Heavy Gunner that was giving us so much problems before is now easily taken down. So as mentioned, DE wanted to be able to make these abilities more synergistic, and I think they succeeded in doing that with the new Saryn Rework. So this brings us to Saren's remaining abilities, Molten and Miasma, and both of these have also been kind of changed to work synergistically with the other abilities. So although you can't cast Spore on Molten anymore, it has become more durable. It actually scales with the enemy's damage. So if the enemy's damage goes up, then so does the durability of Molten. This makes it a little bit more useful for those higher level missions where originally the original Molt used to kind of disintegrate instantly. The new Molt actually lasts a lot longer. Now as far as Miasma is concerned, it has been changed from corrosive damage to viral damage, and the damage factor has gone up from 300 points to 500 points, and in addition to that they have given 100% probability status damage from viral when you cast this ability. So now if you combine it with the corrosive damage from Spore and the toxin damage from Toxic Lash, you can imagine that Saren can give some devastating damage to the surrounding enemies. So now if we go back to the same level 100 corrupted Heavy Gunner Eximus, but now we have 5 of them instead of 1, then I cast Molt, and then I cast Miasma to give a little bit of stun and time to be able to then cast Spore as well as Toxic Lash. And as you can see, even though there's 5 of these guys, Saren can take him out relatively easily. So now the one problem that I have noticed with the recent Spore as compared to the old one is because you have to damage the enemy for it to spread, it sometimes is not all that useful when you work with low and mid-level missions because of the fact that it doesn't have a chance to spread to all the other enemies before the Spore kills it. In low-level enemies, their hit points are so low that the Spore will kill it before you could actually damage the enemy. And if that happens, then it won't spread. And so then you're constantly casting Spore without it spreading to any of the other enemies. And for that situation, then I find that it's actually just easier to clear the area out with Miasma. So I basically have created, in my case anyway, 2 particular builds for Saren, one for a lower level mission and the other for higher level missions. So for low to mid-level missions, I sacrifice strength for maximum range, so I use stretch as well as overextended, and this gives me the ability to maximize both Miasma and Spore to as many enemies as possible, and since I'm using it for low to mid-level missions, I don't need the strength. And for those higher level missions, I swap out Overextended with Blind Rage, and although that reduces the range, it does increase the strength. And for those pesky, hard to kill enemies that come out in high level missions, I find that this is more appropriate. Now, it doesn't have to be Blind Rage. It could be one of the other strength mods like Power Drift or something like that. But I just find that Blind Rage is okay. And although I do get a reduction in efficiency, it's still good enough because of the fact that the recent Saren, since you aren't, spamming Spore all over the place, and because it has an indefinite durability, so long as there's other enemies to spread to, then it turns out to be actually quite efficient because you're reducing the number of castings. Now the one mod that you don't see in these groups, and you probably won't see for most of the builds for Saren, is duration. And that's basically because of the fact that, of course, Spore no longer is duration limited. And since Miasma and Molt are not time dependent, then duration becomes somewhat not all that useful. It may be useful for toxic lash, but if it was me, I would probably increase efficiency so that it will affect all of my capabilities and be able to cast toxic lash more rather than to increase duration. But in any case, I find that for my case, these two mod setups are quite useful. And so in the end, it comes back down to that argument again. Is Saren nerfed or has it been buffed? And that all depends upon who you are. If you're the type that really enjoyed the original Saren capability and really don't want to change the abilities that you had in the past, then no matter what has changed, it will probably be considered as a nerf. On the other hand, if you've always wanted to get a more synergistic gameplay out of Saren and be able to use many of the different abilities synergistically with each other, then the new capabilities may be considered a buff. Overall, some things have been nerfed or changed and some things have been buffed. And so it depends upon your preference and your game style. And if the game style of being able to use many of your abilities to still be able to deal a significant amount of damage to a lot of enemies all at once is okay, then I think Saren will still be okay for you. Overall, for me, I find that this new rework is really enjoyable. I really have fun running Saren these days. Okay, well, in any case, that's about it for this video. And if you have any comments, then please post them in the comment section below. I apologize in advance if I missed something because, I oftentimes miss a lot of things. Or if I made a mistake with anything, then once again, my apologies since I make a lot of mistakes. But in any case, thank you very much for watching the video. I'll continue to make more Warframe videos in the future. And at that time, I hope you join me. Until then, happy hunting. Happy exploring, happy fighting, and as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.